The night sky was on fire. Red and black flames lit the horizon as ships rained down from the stars. The young woman stood on the edge of the broken city, her heart racing. She had grown up here, on this planet of silver rivers and tall glass towers, but now all of it was falling apart. The invaders had come without warning. Their war machines tore through streets. Their soldiers marched like shadows, carrying weapons that glowed with cruel light. People screamed, buildings crumbled, and every corner of her world burned. She ran like so many others, trying to find safety. But there was no safety left. Everywhere she looked, the enemy was there, tall, armored figures with glowing eyes. They did not speak to her people. They only destroyed, only took. Her lungs burned as she tried to hide among the ruins. She could hear children crying, mothers calling for their sons, men shouting in fear and rage. The sound of explosions shook the ground beneath her feet. Then came the capture. A group of enemy soldiers found her hiding near the broken remains of a temple. They dragged her out, their hands like cold iron. She tried to fight, tried to scream, but her voice was lost in the noise of war. They tied her hands and pushed her forward, treating her like nothing more than an object. Around her, others were being taken too, her people, her friends, her neighbors. They were no longer free. They were prisoners. It was there in the dust and smoke that she first heard the words. One of the soldiers laughed, pointing at her as if she was some kind of joke. "Look at this one," he said. "Spoils of war." The others laughed with him. The name clung to her like poison. Spoils of war. She was no longer a person in their eyes. She was just a prize, something to be given away. Fear filled her chest, but so did anger. She wanted to scream that she was not spoils, not a thing, but the rope around her wrists cut into her skin. Her voice was drowned by their cruel laughter. The captives were marched through the ruins of the city. The air smelled of smoke and blood. She kept her eyes low, but her mind screamed questions. Why us? Why me? Will I ever see freedom again? Hours passed, though it felt like days. The prisoners were gathered in a ruined square. Torches burned around them. The enemy commanders stood tall, speaking in harsh voices. She could not understand their language, but she understood their gestures well enough. They were dividing the prisoners. Some were sent to the mines. Some were dragged into cages, and some were given away as if they were trophies. She felt her body shake when one of the soldiers pushed her forward. She fell to her knees in the dirt, her hair falling over her face. The commander looked at her, and for a long moment she thought he would sentence her to death. But instead, he gave a sharp order. The soldiers laughed again. One of them leaned close and whispered in her ear. His breath smelled of smoke and blood. "You are no longer free," he said. "You are nothing. Tomorrow you will be given away to a human war captain." Her eyes widened. A human? She had heard stories of them, fighters who rose from broken worlds, soldiers who survived even when outnumbered, but she had never seen one. Was this captain like the rest of the invaders? Was he cruel? Would he use her like property? Or would he end her life with a single command? Her body trembled as the soldiers chained her to the wall of a ruined building. The night grew colder, but the fire in her mind burned hotter. She was called Spoils of War. That was her new name, her new fate. She had no choice, no freedom, no voice. And yet, deep inside, a spark refused to die. She did not know what kind of man this human captain was. She did not know if tomorrow meant her end, or the start of something different. But she swore one thing to herself, even as the chains dug into her skin. She would not break. She would not vanish into silence. The sound of boots echoed in the distance. The soldiers were moving, preparing for tomorrow. Somewhere far beyond the battlefield, a man waited, the man to whom she would be given like a prize. Her story was about to begin. The morning sun rose behind clouds of smoke. The sky still carried the scars of war, dark trails where ships had fallen, fire where towers once touched the heavens. She was dragged from the cold wall where she had been chained through the night. Her body ached, but her mind was sharper than ever. The soldiers gave no kindness, no water, no food. To them she was only a prize, a thing to be presented. Her heart pounded with every step as they led her through the ruins. She could hear other prisoners whispering, some crying. They spoke of the human captain. Stories moved quickly through broken people. Some said he was merciless. Some said he had no soul left. Others claimed he was worse than the aliens themselves. The woman kept silent, but her fear grew heavier. Who is this man? What will he do with me? They reached the edge of the camp. A wide space opened before her, filled with banners, weapons, and watchtowers. At the center stood a dark structure, not alien, but human-made. Steel walls and command, tents. Soldiers moved in lines, disciplined and silent. Unlike the alien invaders, these humans looked weary, scarred by battles long fought. The woman's knees weakened when they shoved her forward into the largest tent. Inside, the air was still. A single table stood at the center, maps scattered across its surface. Weapons leaned against the walls, their edges dulled by endless use. And behind the table, studying the maps with calm eyes, was the man. The human commander. He was not what she expected. He did not wear golden armor or cruel ornaments like the alien generals. His clothes were plain, dark, heavy with dust. His face carried no triumph, only tiredness. His eyes were sharp, yet there was something behind them, something hidden, unreadable. The soldiers pushed her down to her knees. One of them bowed slightly and spoke. "She is yours now, Captain. Spoils of war." Her chest tightened at the sound of that name again. Spoils. She waited for laughter, for cruelty, for the strike of a hand. But the man behind the table did not laugh. He did not even smile. He looked at her for a long time, silent, his expression unreadable. At last he spoke. His voice was low, steady, carrying neither mockery nor joy. "She is not a thing," he said. The alien soldier frowned. "She is a gift, a token of victory." The captain's eyes hardened. "She is not a token. She is under my protection now. Leave us." The soldiers hesitated, then obeyed. Their boots echoed as they left the tent, until only she and the captain remained. The woman kept her eyes on the ground, trembling. Silence filled the space, heavy and uncomfortable. She waited for him to speak again, to order her, to claim her. But his next words shocked her. "You are safe here," he said quietly. Her head lifted in disbelief. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since her capture, she saw no hunger in a man's gaze, no cruelty, only exhaustion, and perhaps something else. But she could not trust it. She shook her head, her voice a whisper. "No, no one is safe. Not here. Not anywhere." The captain did not argue. He only studied her as if searching for something within her silence. Finally, he moved toward the corner of the tent. From a small chest, he brought food, bread, a flask of water. He placed them gently on the table before her. Her hands trembled as she stared at the food. A trick, she thought. It had to be. But hunger burned her stomach, and before she could stop herself, she reached for the bread. She expected him to laugh, as she ate like the soldiers did. But he only turned back to his maps, giving her silence instead of mockery. The minutes stretched on. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Why would he feed her? Why would he say she was safe? Nothing made sense. As the day passed, soldiers came and went, reporting battles and losses. They saluted the captain, but their eyes always slid toward her with suspicion. She could hear whispers outside the tent. Spoils, weakness, distraction. That night, when the camp grew quiet, the captain ordered a small bedroll to be placed in the far side of the tent. "She stays here," he told the guards. "No one touches her." They grumbled but obeyed. The woman lay awake on the bedroll, her eyes on the canvas ceiling, her mind racing. She could not decide what was worse, the cruelty of the soldiers or the strange kindness of this human commander. And then the sound came. Footsteps outside the tent. Slow, heavy. Too many. Her body froze. Shadows moved against the thin canvas walls. The voices of men whispered. She caught a word. Spoil. Another word. Ours. Her breath quickened. Fear filled her chest. Were they coming for her? Would the captain stop them? Or would he let them in? The footsteps drew closer. The flap of the tent shifted, just slightly. And she knew the night was not over. The night was heavy with silence, but she could not sleep. Every sound in the camp pulled at her nerves. The clank of armor, the murmur of soldiers, the steps that came too close to the tent. Her eyes remained fixed on the canvas roof above her bedroll. She could still hear the whispers from earlier. Voices of men who spoke of her not as a person, but as a thing to be taken. The flap of the tent moved. She sat up quickly, fear gripping her chest. 3 soldiers stepped inside, shadows stretching long behind them. Their faces carried hunger, not for food, but for power over something weaker. One of them smirked. Captain does not need her. He has wars to fight, but we will make use of spoils. The woman's heart raced. She pressed her back against the wall of the tent, searching for escape, but there was none. Her voice trembled. Stay away. The soldier laughed. No, voice will save you, but another voice cut through the air like steel. Enough. The soldiers froze. The captain stood at the table, eyes sharp, hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. He had not been asleep. He had been waiting. His steps were slow, measured as he crossed the tent. The men shifted uneasily under his gaze. His voice was calm but heavy with warning. She is under my protection. Touch her and you will answer to me. One of the soldiers spat on the ground. She is nothing. A spoil. Why waste command on her? The captain's jaw tightened. For a moment the air was tense enough to break. Then, with lightning speed, he drew his blade and placed it against the soldier's throat. The glow of the steel caught the torchlight. She is not a thing, the captain said, his voice low and dangerous. She is not yours. She is not mine. She is under my watch. Leave. Now. The soldiers backed away quickly, fear in their eyes. They muttered under their breath but did not dare stay longer. In moments the tent was empty again, leaving only the woman and the captain. Her breath shook. She had expected cruelty, but instead he had defended her, risked conflict with his own men. For her, the captain returned to his table, sliding the blade back into its sheath. He did not look at her. He simply spoke, his tone softer. You are safe. No one will touch you while I live. She stared at him, trying to understand. Why? Why would he do this for her? She was nothing to him. Only a prisoner. Only a spoil, in the eyes of others. Yet he had stood between her and danger without hesitation. The silence stretched long between them. At last she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Why protect me? The captain's eyes lingered on the maps before him. His hand rested on the table, fingers tense as if holding back a memory. Because I know what it is to be powerless, he said quietly. She waited for more, but he gave none. He turned back to his work as though the matter was finished. But his words echoed in her chest long after. The following days passed with strange stillness. The captain gave her food each morning and made sure no soldier entered his tent without reason. He spoke little, but his actions spoke enough. Why? Men stared at her too long, his gaze silenced them. When whispers grew too bold, his presence ended them, yet he never treated her as a companion. He kept his distance, offering only safety, not friendship. She was free to rest, to breathe, but not free to leave. The chain around her ankle reminded her of that truth. Still, something had changed. Fear no longer filled every hour. Instead, confusion grew stronger. He was her captor, yet her protector. A man of war, yet one who refused to treat her as spoils. One evening she watched him from her bedroll. He sat by the table, helmet removed, rubbing at scars across his arm. His face looked older than his years, worn down by battles. For a moment, she forgot her fear and saw only a man. But the peace did not last. Late one night, while the camp slept, she heard raised voices outside. Soldiers argued with harsh tones. She crept closer to the tent flap and listened. "She makes him weak," one man spat. "The captain changes because of her." Another replied, "If he falters in battle, it will be because of this woman. We should end her before she destroys him." Her blood turned cold. They wanted her gone. They saw her not as a prisoner, but as a threat to their leader. She backed away, trembling. If the captain knew of these whispers, would he still protect her? Or would he see her as the weakness his men believed she was? She lay awake until dawn, torn between fear and hope. The captain was her shield now, her silent protector. But how long could he stand against his own army? And in her heart a darker question burned. Was she his protection, or his downfall? The days dragged on inside the camp. Each sunrise brought the same rhythm. Food placed before her, guards outside the tent. The captain bent over maps with tired eyes. The war raged beyond the walls, but inside the canvas shelter, time felt like a cage. She could not understand him, the human commander. He never raised a hand against her. He never mocked her. He had stopped his own men from harming her. And yet she was still a prisoner. Chains around her ankle reminded her every hour of what she truly was, spoils of war. At night, she would stare at the flap of the tent, her thoughts heavy. If he truly meant to protect me, why keep me in chains? Why keep me here at all? The kindness was a trap, she told herself. He wanted her to lower her guard. He wanted her to forget she was a prisoner. And so in silence, she began to plan her escape. One night, when the camp was quieter than usual, the chance came. The captain had left the tent to meet with his officers. The guards outside seemed distracted, drinking and laughing around a fire. The chain on her ankle was strong, but the peg that held it to the ground had loosened. Her hands shook as she pulled again and again, until at last the peg slipped free. For the first time since her capture, her body was unbound. Her heart raced. Freedom was only steps away. She pushed the flap of the tent aside and slipped into the shadows. The cold air bit at her skin, but she did not care. She moved quickly, keeping low, staying close to the walls. Every sound felt like a storm in her ears, the crunch of her steps, the whisper of her breath. Soldiers laughed near the fires, but their eyes were on their cups, not on her. She crept, past them one heartbeat at a time. At the edge of the camp, she saw the forest, dark, endless. It called to her like a promise. If she reached it, she could vanish, no chains, no soldiers, no captain. But fate is cruel. A voice shouted behind her. A soldier had seen the movement of her shadow. Stop! Panic tore through her. She ran. Her feet pounded the dirt. Her lungs burned. The forest was so close, but they were faster. A soldier tackled her to the ground. Pain exploded through her shoulder as she hit the earth. She struggled, kicking, clawing, but more hands joined in. Rough laughter filled her ears. She runs like a wild thing, one sneered. Not wild anymore, another said, pressing her down. Terror filled her chest. She had escaped the chain, but not the prison. Then a roar broke through the night. Enough. The soldiers froze. The captain was there, blade drawn, fury in his eyes. His presence cut through the men like fire through dry wood. He stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding. Release her. The soldiers hesitated. She tried to run, Captain. She is spoils. She does not deserve. The captain's blade pressed against the closest man's throat. Release her, he repeated. One by one, the hands let go. She pulled herself to her knees, gasping for air. Dirt clung to her skin, her hair tangled, her eyes wide with fear. The captain looked down at her. His voice, when he spoke, was not angry but heavy with disappointment. Why did you run? Her chest heaved. Because I am not safe here. she whispered. Because I am still a prisoner. The camp was silent around them. Soldiers watched from the shadows, their whispers thick with judgment. But the captain ignored them. He knelt slightly, his face level with hers. You think chains hold you, he said softly. But it is war that holds us all. Her eyes burned, with tears. Then why keep me here? Why not let me go? For the first time his gaze faltered, his jaw tightened as if he carried a truth too heavy to speak. Finally he whispered so only she could hear. Because I know what it feels like to be a captive. And I will never let another suffer it. If I can stop it. The words struck her like lightning. He had been a captive. This man, feared by soldiers, hardened by war. She wanted to ask more, but he stood quickly, his eyes hard again. Back to your duties, he ordered the soldiers. His voice was cold steel now. If any of you touch her again, you will not live to regret it. The men scattered. The captain turned back to her. He did not offer his hand. He only spoke in that quiet, steady tone. You may hate me, you may fear me, but you are alive because I will it. Do not run again. Then he walked away, leaving her in the dirt, her heart torn between fear and something she could not name. That night, as she lay awake once more, his words repeated in her mind. I know what it feels like to be a captive. And for the first time she wondered, who was this man, truly? The camp was quiet after the failed escape. No one spoke to her now, but everyone stared. Soldiers carried suspicion in their eyes, anger in their whispers. To them she was trouble, a risk, a weakness to their captain. Yet the captain did not punish her. He did not tighten her chains or shout at her. Instead, he gave her silence. For days he said little. He ate little. He spent his hours bent over maps and war reports, his expression harder than stone. But sometimes when he thought she was not looking, his eyes would linger on her, not with anger but with something unreadable. She carried his words inside her. I know what it feels like to be a captive. They turned in her mind again and again until they felt heavier than chains. She needed to know the truth. One night, the campfire burned low. The soldiers had retreated into their tents, leaving only the crackle of flames and the hum of insects. She sat by the edge of the fire, the chain on her ankle glinting faintly. The Bayo captain sat across from her, his face half hidden in shadow. He sharpened his blade slowly, the rasp of metal against stone breaking the silence. Her voice, soft and trembling, crossed the fire. You said you knew what it was like, Hamur, to be a captive. His hand stilled. The blade paused mid-motion. For a long time he did not look at her. Then slowly, he set the weapon aside. Yes, he said at last. His voice was steady but low, as if the memory itself weighed him down. She leaned closer, eyes searching his face. How? He stared into the flames. His eyes reflected fire, but they were far away, lost in another time. I was taken when I was young. My world was broken in war, as yours was. I was not a soldier then, only a boy. They dragged me from my family, chained me like an animal. Years passed before I saw freedom again. Her breath caught. She had never imagined this man, this feared commander, as a child in chains. What did they do to you? She whispered. His jaw tightened. Enough that I carry the scars still. Not here. He touched his arm. But here. He tapped his chest. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence his words left behind. She felt her throat tighten. She wanted to speak, to say she understood, but her voice failed. Instead, she simply lowered her head. For the first time since her capture, she felt a strange thread of connection. Two broken lives bound by the same pain. The captain's gaze lingered on her, softer now. I will not let that happen to you, he said. Not while you are under my watch. She looked up at him, her voice trembling. But why me? You could have let them take me, you could have looked away. For a moment, something unspoken passed through his eyes. Then he answered, slow and deliberate. Because if I protect no one, then I am no different from the monsters who once held me. The words struck her deep. They did not erase her fear, but they carved something new within her. Respect, perhaps even trust. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to believe he was not her enemy. The night grew colder, but the fire kept them close. Slowly, she found her voice again. My people, they called us dreamers. We believed peace would last forever. We never thought war would come. We were wrong. The captain's eyes softened, though his expression stayed firm. War always comes, he said. Peace is only borrowed time. Her chest ached. Then what is the point of living, if war always takes everything? He looked at her across the fire, his scarred hands resting on his knees. His answer came quietly. Because even in war we can choose who we are. I was a prisoner once. Now I choose to be a shield. You can choose too. Her lips parted, but no words came. The fire flickered, warming her face, but her heart felt unsettled. He spoke like a man who carried too many ghosts. Before she could reply, the sound tore through the night, a scream, a blast. The ground shook beneath them. The fire leapt high as the camp erupted in chaos. Soldiers shouted orders, weapons clashed, alarms rang through the air. The captain was on his feet instantly, blade in hand. His voice thundered. To arms! Enemy attack! Her heart raced. She scrambled back, chains clinking as shadows rose. At the edge of the camp, dark shapes, armed and fast. Flames spread, smoke filled the air. The clash of battle swallowed the night. She looked toward the captain. His figure was outlined in fire, his sword already wet with the blood of the attackers. He fought like a storm, unbreakable, unyielding. But then, an enemy slipped through the chaos, racing toward her. Her scream tore the air as the shadow raised its weapon, and in the blink of an eye the captain turned, eyes burning with fury, charging toward her. The night was fire. Screams and steel filled the camp as enemies poured through the gates. Torches lit the dark sky, smoke curled into the heavens, and every heartbeat sounded like a drum of death. She stumbled back against the tent as the shadow soldier raised his weapon to strike her. But before the blade could fall, the captain was there. His sword clashed with the attacker's weapon, sparks bursting into the night. With one swift strike, the enemy fell. The captain stood over her, his chest rising with heavy breath, his eyes fierce with fire. Stay behind me, he commanded. Her body froze, fear locking her limbs, but she obeyed. The chain around her ankle rattled as she moved closer to the tent wall, clinging to the shadows. The battle raged around them. Soldiers fell. Arrows whistled through the air. The camp, once filled with uneasy silence, now roared with chaos. The captain fought like a storm. His blade never paused, cutting through attackers with deadly precision. Every strike was filled with purpose, not only to survive, but to shield her from the enemy. And for the first time she realized he was willing to die for her. A soldier broke through the line and charged at her. She screamed, but again the captain was there. He blocked the blow, taking the strike across his shoulder. Blood splashed the ground, yet he did not fall. He turned, his blade driving into the enemy's chest, protecting her once more. Pain flashed across his face, but he stood tall. His eyes burned not with anger, but with something deeper, a vow he had made in silence. Her heart raced. Why? Why would a man of war risk his life for her, a captive, a spoil, someone who meant nothing in the eyes of his soldiers? The answer rose unspoken in her chest. Perhaps she was not nothing to him. The attack grew fiercer. Flames spread across the camp, tents collapsing in sparks. Soldiers shouted around them, some falling, some fighting, the battle dragging them. Toward the river at the camp's edge, an explosion shook the ground. She was thrown back, landing hard against the dirt. Her breath caught as dust clouded her vision. Through the smoke she saw the captain still fighting, his sword striking again and again, but his movement slowed, his strength weakening with Each drop of blood, Captain, she cried, her voice breaking. He turned just long enough to see her face through the fire, and in his eyes for the first time she saw it clearly. Not just duty, not just protection, something more. Love. The word echoed in her mind, terrifying and impossible yet true. He did not protect her because of orders or honor or guilt. He protected her because somewhere in his scarred heart, he had chosen her. Tears blurred her eyes as she crawled toward him. But before she could reach him, another attacker struck. The captain met the blow, but it drove him to his knees. She screamed again. Her fear was no longer for herself, it was for him. The attacker raised his weapon for the final strike. Without thinking, she grabbed a broken spear from the ground and thrust it forward. The enemy fell, his weapon clattering beside him. Her hands shook, her chest heaved, but she was alive. And so was the captain. She rushed to him, falling to her knees at his side. Blood soaked his shoulder, his chest, his side. His breath came heavy, ragged. "You're hurt," she whispered, her voice trembling. He tried to smile, though pain bent his face. "I've been hurt before." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She pressed her hands against his wounds, trying to stop the flow, but the blood would not stop. Her chains rattled as she leaned closer, her voice desperate. "Why do you do this? Why keep saving me? I am nothing to you." His hand, cold and shaking, touched hers. His eyes met hers, heavy with truth. "You are not nothing," he whispered. "You are the reason I fight." The words shattered her. Her chest ached, her tears fell faster. For so long she had been called spoils, worthless, a prize to be claimed. But to him, she was something more. Before she could speak, another explosion ripped through the camp. Soldiers shouted. The ground shook. The night filled with chaos. Again, the captain coughed, blood staining his lips. His body swayed, then collapsed into her arms. "No!" she cried, clutching him tight. Her heart pounded, her body trembling. Around her, the battle still raged, enemies closing in, fire spreading across the camp. She looked down at him, pale and broken in her embrace. The man who had given her safety, who had given her worth, who had given her a choice. Now the choice was hers. Freedom lay in the forest beyond the flames. She could run, leave him, vanish into the night. Or she could stay, fight for him, and risk dying by his side. Her hands shook as she held him closer, the world burning around them. Her voice, broken a whisper, carried only to him. "I will not leave you." And with those words, her heart chose its path. The camp was burning. Smoke curled into the night sky. Fire licked the torn tents, and the clash of steel still echoed across the battlefield. Soldiers fought desperately, some falling, some fleeing, as the enemy pressed harder. But for her, the world narrowed to the man in her arms. The captain lay still, his body heavy with blood. His breath came in shallow gasps, each one weaker than the last. "Stay with me," she whispered, tears running down her face. "Don't leave me." For so long she had been a prisoner, dragged across a war not of her making. For so long she had believed she was nothing more than spoils. But now, holding him, she realized the truth. He was no longer her captor. He was her reason to fight. Enemies closed in, their shadows stretching across the firelight. She could see their weapons glinting, hear their cruel laughter. Her hands trembled as she set the captain down gently. She picked up his sword. Heavy, far too heavy for her, but she gripped it with both hands. Fear screamed in her mind, but another voice rose louder. "He protected me. Now I must protect him." The first attacker rushed forward. She swung clumsily, but the blade caught him across the chest. He fell with a cry. Her arms shook from the force, but she stood her ground. Another came, and another. She fought with desperation, not skill, every strike fueled by fire in her heart. She did not fight to escape. She fought to shield the man who had shielded her. The battle roared around them, but slowly the tide began to turn. Soldiers of the captain's unit rallied to their leader, seeing her standing over him with his sword. They charged forward with renewed strength, cutting through the enemy lines. Her arms ached, her breath came ragged, but she refused to fall. When the last attacker near her collapsed, she dropped the sword and fell back to the captain's side. His eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. He saw her, blood-stained and trembling, and a faint smile touched his lips. "You stayed," he whispered. Her tears fell onto his armor. "I told you I will not leave you." The battle ended before dawn. The enemy was driven back, leaving only smoke and silence in their wake. The camp was ruined but not destroyed. Survivors gathered among the wreckage, weary and broken. The away woman sat beside the captain as healers worked to close his wounds. He drifted in and out of consciousness, but his hand never let go of hers. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky gold, the soldiers stood around their leader. Their eyes turned to her as well, not with scorn this time, but with something different. Respect. She had fought with them, she had bled for him, and in doing so, she had earned her place. Days passed as the camp rebuilt. The captain's strength returned slowly. He bore new scars, but his spirit remained unbroken. Each evening she sat with him, no longer chained, no longer hidden. One night when the fire burned low, he spoke softly, his eyes on the horizon. "They gave you to me as spoils, but I never saw you as that." Her throat tightened. "Then what do you see me as?" He turned his gaze to her. The firelight reflected in his eyes, warm and steady. "As my equal, as my reason to keep fighting." Her chest ached with emotion, but this time it was not pain. It was something new, something brighter. She reached for his hand, and he took it without hesitation. No chains bound her now. No titles defined her. She was no longer spoils of war. The soldiers began to call her by another name, not prisoner, not weakness, but companion. They saw her at the captain's side, not behind him. She walked freely through the camp, her steps no longer heavy with fear. The world outside was still broken, battles still raged, enemies still threatened. But inside her heart, something had healed. She had been dragged into war as nothing. She had found love in the unlikeliest place, in the eyes of a man who once was her captor, but who had chosen instead to be her protector. And now, she chose him in return. One evening, as the stars filled the sky, she sat with him beyond the fires where the night was quiet. The war seemed distant for a moment. "You gave me freedom," she said softly, "not by letting me go, but by letting me choose." His hand tightened around hers. "And you chose to stay." She smiled. A true smile, the first in what felt like years. "Yes, I chose you." The wind carried their silence, gentle and full. For the first time since her world had fallen, she felt whole. No longer a captive, no longer a spoil. She was his companion, his equal, his love. And together, they would face whatever the war brought next.